What we want to do is say, rather than causing this massive shift in your ad account by altering all of the optimization settings, the question is, can we get a view of the actual incremental return on spend with the present settings? And what is usually true is that 7-day click, 1-day view over reports the impact and 7-day click under reports the impact, but it doesn't really matter. And in some cases, I would even argue, especially for higher AOV or lower budget, actually having more signal to Meta about who is purchasing.
This episode of the e-commerce playbook is brought to you by Mercury. Here at Common Thread Collective, we know that cash flow is everything, especially right now. That's why we always recommend that our clients use Mercury to manage their banking, capital, and cards all from one place. Mercury lets you receive funds, generate invoices, and send free international and domestic wires in US dollars. Mercury also gives you instant access to virtual credit cards and 1.5% cash back across all your spend. Plus, if you need inventory or advertising, try Mercury's founder-friendly capital. Mercury brings all the ways you use money into one product that feels extraordinary to use. Deposit or spend $5,000 using the Mercury credit card within your first 90 days to earn $250, or do both for $500 in total rewards. Just go to mercury.com/CTC to give it a try with no minimum deposits. That's mercury.com/CTC. Mercury is a technology company, not a bank. Check show notes for details. Hey folks, welcome to the e-commerce playbook podcast. I'm your host, Richard Gaffin, director of digital product strategy here at Common Thread. And I'm joined, as I usually am, and also by the voice of Luke Austin in the background. If you can
I could probably mute a little bit with the big boomer in the background.
Our AI tools will make it impossible to hear him. But of course, I'm joined by Taylor Holiday, our CEO here at Common Thread. Taylor, what's going on today, man?
Nothing, man. Just been hanging out with ChatGPT a bunch, working on my big speech for the summit next week.
Nice.
So really trying to find something exciting to say, in the world, and having the robot help me.
How's ChatGPT helping with that?
I told it to act like Nancy Duarte and help me build a great presentation. ChatGPT knows all about Nancy, knows everything about her, helped me. It's just really incredible, to be honest, Richard, what it has the capacity to do for you.
No, it's pretty insane. You ever use it for therapy?
I am learning to talk to it. So the way I interact now primarily with ChatGPT is with voice. So I'll say, I'll just start hitting dictate and I'll just talk. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. This is the presentation. This is the main topic. I want to use Duarte format. So give me feedback and slide iteration like that. Here's some key data points that I want to use along the way. And just for me, just talking rather than typing. And then it transcribes it all and I hit send and it's just great. So sometimes when I'm driving, I'll just throw it up and just talk for a while. Just to, hey, here's some context I want you to know about me and my life, etc. It's really incredible.
Honestly, yeah, the external processor's dream is how I think about it. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Talk to people all you want. They never get pissed at you. All right. Well, speaking of AI, which is sort of what we're talking about today. So if you have clicked this video or listening to it in your feed or whatever, you'll probably have seen a title somewhere along the lines of Taylor Holiday loves view conversions now, which is sort of our clickbaity inroads into this. But what I think we wanted to talk about today is, of course, for a long time, CTC has sort of taken a stance against view conversions. We have our attribution settings, a 7-day click, whatever, because our idea was that gives you the clearest lens into what's actually happening with your ad account. But in some important ways, those things have changed, Taylor. So why don't you kind of set up for us what you want to talk about here vis-a-vis view conversion?
Yeah, so I saw a conversation happening on Twitter a couple times this week about whether or not view conversions are good. And I think this is a debate that we can actually leave behind. And that's sort of what I want to get to today. And we've been at the center of this debate in many ways in the past, which is we historically would move all of our accounts onto 7-day click optimization. And that was because that was an attempt for a proxy at obligating the system to the most incremental purchase that we could. And to be able to use 7-day click as a proxy attribution method for the truest outcome. And if we think about what we're trying to say with that, is that we're trying to speak to incrementality without the language, right? Mm-hmm. We're trying to say, are these purchases actually incremental to my business? And whether it's a view or a click, these are just poor attempts at what can actually be determined. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is my encouragement to anybody, if you're out there having this debate, is that you don't actually have to decide. And so I want to tell you a little bit about today, the way we approach if we receive an ad account, whereas historically we would have transformed everything from 7-day click, 1-day view to immediately to 7-day click, how we're approaching it more now.
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's talk about that. So obviously, if you listening right now have heard some of my conversations with Tony Chop, a lot of the conversation there is about shifting away from kind of these attribution windows and these click and view attribution settings altogether and switching towards some of the new incremental settings, incremental attribution settings in Meta. So is that what we're talking about, or is there some other way that we're like thinking about this with clients right now?
Yeah, well, exactly. What we want to do is say, rather than causing this massive like shift in your ad account by altering all of the optimization settings, the question is, can we get a view of the actual incremental return on spend with the present settings? And what is usually true is that 7-day click, 1-day view over reports the impact and 7-day click under reports the impact, but it doesn't really matter. And in some cases, I would even argue, especially for higher AOV or lower budget, actually having more signal to Meta about who is purchasing, whether they're incremental or not, could be useful. And therefore, what you're able to do is just create the appropriate factor between the reported ROAS and the actual incremental ROAS. And so if that's a 7-day click, 1-day view, that might be a 0.8 factor where you're taking a 2-to-1, multiplying it by 0.8 and ending up with a 1.6 IROAS. Whereas if it's a 7-day click number, it might be a 1.2 to where the factor actually increases the reported ROAS. But in either case, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what is the incremental return on ad spend. And I don't see any evidence that one of those optimization settings is necessarily going to be a prerequisite to driving a higher IROAS. There's probably some dependencies there on the brand, the size, the organic demand, etc. But as long as you understand the relationship between the optimization setting and your IROAS, then you're okay. Then it doesn't really matter. And we don't need to wonder if view conversions are useful or not.
Right. So I think one of my questions is, to what extent is this, so having to manage the relationship between click conversions and view conversions, I'm sorry, managing the relationships between those attribution windows and iROAS, so how long is that going to continue to be a thing? Because like, again, part of the conversation with Tony is like iROAS as a metric in and of itself or as an attribution setting is just coming down the pike.
That's right.
So this is sort of like, is this kind of a moot point and in 3 months we won't have to care about it, or will that have to be something that continues to be managed?
Well, I think you're asking a very good question, which is the solution to the old argument we're saying that's still happening, that's really dead. Our proposed solution today may also be dead, which is to say that the end result here is for the system itself to optimize for an incremental conversion, right? Like that's ideally what you actually want and where Meta is headed. We're continuing to broaden the delivery of that. So the reason I want to keep having this episode, and I know if you listen to us a lot, you may be like, guys, okay, we've heard this episode, but I can tell you that like, if Twitter represents the early adopters of our industry and people that are like out on sort of, you think about the sort of classic bell curve, I would say that most of Twitter, especially some of the people I've seen having this conversation, are like, they're still early adopters and they are still debating the merits of click versus view conversions. Then we have not gone far enough in saying this over and over and over to get people to adopt what is the future of measurement and where it's headed. And so we need to keep saying it, is that you don't have to have this debate. You can find out what the actual incrementality is using Geo-Holdout. And then Meta is also actually going to provide you with a solution to optimize for incremental conversions themselves.
Trusted by more than 200,000 startups, small businesses, and e-commerce companies, plus many of our clients here at CTC, Mercury gives you the ability to manage your banking, capital, and cards all from one place. E-commerce Playbook podcast listeners get $250 by depositing $5,000 or spending $5,000 using the Mercury credit card within your first 90 days, or do both for $500 at mercury.com/CTC. Mercury is a technology company, not a bank. Check show notes for details. Right. Okay, so let's talk about that debate a little bit and do a little counterpoint here. And so obviously, yes, that whatever the iROAS future is not here yet, and this debate is continuing on. So let's talk about that. And I got a tweet here from Johnny Hickey here, and this is something that you responded to, but I want to give you a chance to kind of give a counterpoint to this because he's providing evidence, so to speak, that view is better. And basically, I'll just read it out here. I trust view conversions for new customers. June, we had 3x or 3,000 new customers, great views, view conversions, 2,345 customers, 7-day click conversions, 1,863. If I only looked at 7-day click, I'd be cutting spend, but Facebook view lines up with about 75% with my actuals. 7-day click is barely 50,000. You think I'm getting 1,800 customers a month for free? Come on, I've tested this. Years ago, I saw a post saying I don't trust view conversion, so I cut spend, revenue tanked in a week, scaled up, revenue came back. I've run that test multiple times, same result every time. Facebook view may undercount, but it's closer to reality than 7-day click. That sounds wrong. Does anyone mind if I leave the M dashes in?
Well, so what Johnny's attempting to do is exactly what can be done specifically. Is that, and this is what we used to do. Look at AMER versus 7-day click versus 7-day click 1-day view. There's a blog about this on our website where we looked at the correlation between all of these attribution measures and your actual new customer revenue. Because what you're trying to do there is to determine what is actually incremental from your ad spend. But you don't have to guess at this. There's great design, experiment design, to be able to run a holdout, to be able to tell you what the actual incremental impact of your ad spend is, and compare that to any attribution measure and factor accordingly. And so what he's doing is he's sort of like generalizing an experiment design that can be actually specifically designed to be answered. And so I think what it is it's incremental thinking. It's thinking about incrementality without actually executing on the premise. And I responded in that tweet and said, like, hey, you don't have to guess at this. You could just run a test. And he said, yeah, but how much does that cost? And I said, $0. It costs nothing. And I sent him the link to our landing page where you get a test for free. And so he's like, let's do it. Let's set it up. So hopefully we can come back and actually use this specific illustration to talk about whether he's right in the idea that 7-day click 1-day view is closer than 7-day click to reporting what is actually incremental. And maybe for his case it is. I'm not above saying that could be possible, but I think we could find out. And that's the beauty of it, is we don't have to guess.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk then about the scenario that you were mentioning before, which is that like you run a holdout test, let's say, and that determines that your 7-day click is, the 7-day click is over-reporting by like 20%, let's say, and then view is over-reporting by 60% or whatever. Now, is there any scenario under which since you know that and you can adjust accordingly, it's still might be better to run view over and against click? So what scenario?
So this is Yoni Levy. So Yoni Levy, who's my favorite meta rep. I'm sorry to all other meta reps. And he's not a meta rep. He runs all of ecom for Canada. He's an executive, but he and I have had this debate before based on the exact premise that what view does is just gives the machine more signal. It allows them to assign credit to people buying your product and having an ad impression. So it's just signal about who, when, where, why. And he always said, just factor down the 7-day click 1-day view versus factoring up 7-day click for the sake of getting the machine more signal. And like, I'm totally okay with that. I don't have a problem. I just historically didn't know how much to factor it down. So it felt riskier. And it actually felt in many ways like I actually had an incentive as your advertising partner to misconstrue how efficient I was being when I used 7-day click 1-day. And so I felt like 7-day click was a more conservative view, actually to our own detriment. It actually, when brands would come to us and they would have a 7-day click ROAS of 4. And so imagine like for years, there's a report showing that your Facebook ROAS is 4. And it doesn't, like, there's no asterisk saying 7-day click 1-day view optimization. It just says Facebook ROAS 4-1. And that gets shared with everybody. And then we would come in and change everything to 7-day click. And all of a sudden it's 2.3. And then even though the 7-day click ROAS was better now than it was then, the just blanket ROAS of 2.3 versus 4 was always hard for people internally in an organization to stomach. So in some ways, I actually more and more are like, hey, let's keep the 7-day click 1-day view. We don't need to change and disrupt everything. Let's just understand the factor of the actual incremental impact. We'll leave the signal. We'll leave all the reporting. Let's just make sure that we understand how incremental that 7-day click 1-day view is to your actual business.
Gotcha. So then to be clear then, like if you're coming in with a 7-day click 1-day view and you have some sense of the incrementality of that spend, there's no real need to switch.
That's right. The other thing though that you have to be careful to do is I've seen people that will run lots of different optimization settings in their ad account or switch between them all the time. That's really hard to do. It's really hard to create an appropriate measurement system when you're changing the optimization settings all the time. So one of the things about this measurement framework and incrementality is that it requires a commitment to a set of actions that are assessed on a regular cadence, test, retest constantly, update your priors, constantly evolving source of truth. But once you have a set of information, you have to behave within it all the time. Now, could you have a gut check against the actual business impact and have a running sort of corollary to AMER still and things like that? Sure, I'm fine with that. These tests are not without subject to variability in future results. So there's changes based on period of time, availability of inventory, ad creative, all sorts of factors. So we do want to be cautious about that and thoughtful about it. But we can't be just constantly changing the optimization setting and using the same factor and expectation.
Right. Makes sense. All right. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Attribution setting doesn't matter. All that matters is
I'm back in on views. Yoni, I'm in.
Right.
Team view conversions.
Incredible. Wow. What a change. Change in the air. All right, folks. Well, Taylor, anything else you want to hit on this?
No, I think this same principle applies to Google. Google by default reports on 28 day click 1 day view. It reports on a delayed attribution. It reports on time of impression versus time of purchase. So there's some more complications in the relationship to build a real-time ROAS for Google. Is a little bit more complicated than Meta. Probably a worthwhile episode to be done about that topic specifically. But the idea is that these answers are available to you where you can get clarity of the incremental impact of every channel. You can normalize them to a single ROAS expectation where you actually can draw a direct comparison between Google branded search and Facebook prospecting, where ROAS is telling you the same thing in both cases because you factored them down appropriately based on running good holdout studies. And that is where measurement becomes simple and budget allocation becomes simple, when you can look at those channels and you don't have to siphon through. Branded search is saying 16-1, Facebook saying 4-1, Google saying 9-1, and you're trying to interpret that. You run the experiments across a broad set of channels, and it creates a stepway to clarity of decision making.
That's right. All right. Well, and as you mentioned before, Taylor, if this is something that you're interested in, running an incrementality test on your ad account, getting a sense of where you actually stand, you know who to call.
First test free.
First test free, folks. $0. CommonThread.co.com. Hit that ROAS button. We would love to chat more about running this type of thing for you. All right, folks. I think that's going to do it for us for today. Short and sweet. And we'll talk to you next time.